The barracks had always carried the smell of dust, sweat, and old steel, but for Lieutenant Kara Hensley it carried something sharper: rejection. She had trained as hard as any other soldier, bled in the mud, pushed her body to its breaking point, and passed the sniper qualification course with near-perfect scores. Yet, when the combat roster came down, her name wasn't there. They said her presence was more valuable in supportive roles, coordination, logistics, or training others. Behind closed doors, she heard the whispers: she was too young, too slight, too untested. In truth, they couldn't stomach the idea of a woman carrying the kind of responsibility that could turn the tide of battle. It burned her inside, the casual way they dismissed her, as though her rifle didn't fire the same rounds, as though her eyes couldn't find targets others missed. For weeks she carried that sting with quiet grit, drilling herself in silence, determined that one day the chance would come when no denial could erase her worth. That chance arrived on a dawn that began with static on the comms and a scout's frantic report of enemy movement pressing close to their forward outpost. The valley below their position stretched wide and unforgiving, a jagged cut of earth where stone ridges hid threats like teeth. The unit assigned to guard it was small, barely 30 soldiers tasked with holding the line until reinforcements could arrive. Intelligence had claimed the enemy wouldn't risk a strike in this sector, but intelligence had been wrong before. Kara had been stationed at the watchtower, technically not on combat duty, her rifle hanging as if only decoration, when she caught the first flicker of movement in her scope. Shadows didn't move that way unless they had intent. She tracked them patiently, her finger brushing the trigger out of habit, her breath measured. Within seconds the faint blur sharpened into forms. Enemy soldiers, dozens of them, creeping through the low fog, their formation wide, their weapons ready. They were preparing to ambush. Kara's stomach knotted, but not in fear. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Her comms officer dismissed her urgency at first, saying the radar showed nothing, that perhaps she was seeing tricks of light. But when the fog shifted and she counted nearly 40 approaching, even the officer's voice stammered with alarm. Orders scrambled across the channel, half shouted, half disbelieved. The unit below had seconds to react, but they were unprepared, scattered, still eating breakfast or checking gear. Kara knew hesitation here would mean death. She steadied her rifle on the railing, chambered around, and found the one figure who stood out among the creeping silhouettes. An officer, marked by the way others deferred to him, his movements crisp, his position central. She judged him the leader. Without clearance, without permission, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, the shot cutting through the morning quiet. The officer collapsed instantly, the rest of the enemy formation freezing in disbelief, then scattering for cover. Kara's own unit flinched at the sound. It wasn't her role to fire. She had violated protocol. Yet as shouts of contact erupted across the outpost, Kara ignored the shock around her. Through her scope she saw confusion ripple through the enemy lines, their coordination faltering, their rush delayed. She had bought precious seconds. Already the soldiers below were grabbing weapons, sprinting to defensive positions, the urgency now undeniable. If she had waited for permission they'd all be dead. The enemy regrouped quickly, anger replacing surprise. Kara kept her cheek pressed against the stock, adjusting her aim, breathing as she had trained 1,000 times. Each pull of the trigger felt like vindication. One target dropped behind a boulder, another crumpled as he tried to flank. She counted her shots, adjusted wind and distance instinctively, never letting her hands tremble. She heard boots pounding the tower stairs, her superior officers rushing up, ready to drag her away from the weapon she wasn't authorized to use. But when they reached her and looked through her scope at what she had done, their outrage turned to silence. The soldiers she had pinned were the very ones poised to tear their line apart. Without her fire, the unit would have been overwhelmed. The men stared at her, torn between discipline and awe, their authority colliding with the undeniable reality outside. Below, chaos thundered. The unit held position behind sandbags and walls, firing down into the valley. Explosions cracked against stone, shrapnel rattling like hail. Kara's spotter, a man who had always dismissed her as book-trained, suddenly slid beside her, loading extra magazines, handing them wordlessly as though he had always been her partner. They spoke in short bursts, range, angle, wind, like they had done it for years. Her shots weren't just precision, they were decisive. Twice she eliminated heavy gunners before they could set up. Once she saw an enemy squad sneaking around the ridge toward the barracks. She ended that too, leaving the survivors scattering. Each kill was not about glory but survival. Each second she held them back meant another 20 of her people could live. The radio finally crackled with desperate acknowledgement. Reinforcements were on their way, but it would take at least 20 minutes. 20 minutes in battle felt like eternity. Kara didn't think of time, only of the rhythm of her breathing, the recoil of the rifle, the next target. When her officer crouched beside her, sweat on his brow, eyes wide, he didn't tell her to stop. He simply asked, "Where do you need us?" It was the moment her world shifted. They had denied her combat status, dismissed her as unworthy, but now, in the thick smoke and gunfire, no one dared question her. She wasn't just fighting, she was commanding the field with every shot. And though none of them admitted it aloud, they all knew the truth as clear as the bodies in the valley. Lieutenant Kara Hensley had just saved them all. The crack of gunfire rolled across the valley like thunder, echoing off jagged stone, drowning out every other sound. Kara's rifle barrel burned hot against her palms, the metal trembling with the rhythm of constant shots. Her spotter kept the magazines coming, his earlier skepticism evaporated in the urgency of survival. Every time she fired, someone's life was spared. Her comrades below knew it, even if they couldn't look up to see the woman who had been denied a place among them. The enemy advance slowed but did not stop. For every soldier she struck down, another surged forward, driven by desperation or fury at the collapse of their leader. The valley had become a furnace, fire flashing from both sides, men shouting, bullets tearing through the air like angry wasps. Kara stayed calm, her world narrowed to scope, breath, trigger, kill. She barely registered the officer crouched near her shoulder, radio pressed to his ear, his voice hoarse as he pleaded for faster reinforcements. The man who had once dismissed her as a liability now clung to her precision as if it were the only rope keeping them from the abyss. The enemy changed tactics. Deprived of their commanding officer, smaller squads began probing different approaches. Some crawled along the dry creek bed to the east trying to flank. Kara shifted her aim, adjusted the elevation and cut them down before they could crest the ridge. Others tried rushing straight through the center, spraying gunfire wildly. She picked off the front runners with calm efficiency, sowing panic and hesitation, turning their charge into chaos. Each time she reloaded, the seconds stretched thin, her chest tight, but her hands never fumbled. Below her the unit rallied. Soldiers who had been half-dressed minutes earlier now fired from sandbag nests, their faces smeared with grit and fear. They were alive only because the opening blow had been delayed by Kara's single shot. 20 lives, maybe more, hung suspended on the edge of her skill. She thought of the dismissal letters, the evaluations that had called her suitable only for training roles, and a bitter smile touched her lips. Let them watch now. Let them see what she had always known, that she was a soldier no different from them, maybe stronger. Then came the counterattack. The enemy, realizing they could not take the valley by stealth, pulled back into cover and unleashed heavy fire. Mortar shells arced overhead, smashing into the outpost walls, shaking the tower beneath Kara's boots. Dust and splinters rained down, the tower groaning like an old tree under storm. Kara pressed her cheek harder against the rifle, refusing to flinch. One shell tore a crater near the barracks, throwing men sprawling. She adjusted her scope and scanned the ridgeline. There, the telltale glint of mortar tubes being set up again. She didn't wait for orders. She exhaled, fired, and the man bracing the tube dropped instantly. A second shot, another fell. Her third round caught the one carrying the shell before it could be loaded. The explosions dwindled, the immediate threat neutralized. Her officer gave a breathless laugh, half disbelief, half relief, and slapped her shoulder. "You just saved us again," he muttered, almost to himself. Kara didn't answer, her eyes already tracking the next danger. Down below, Corporal Myers, a young soldier barely 19, screamed for help as he dragged a wounded comrade toward cover. Enemy fire stitched the ground around them. Kara didn't think, didn't hesitate. Her scope found the muzzle flashes targeting the boy. 3 precise shots silenced them. Myers stumbled into safety, dragging his friend behind sandbags, his wide eyes lifting toward the tower. He raised a hand in shaky gratitude, though Kara doubted he could even see her clearly. She lowered her rifle only long enough to acknowledge him with a small nod, then turned back to the battlefield. It wasn't about recognition, it was about duty, survival, doing what she had trained to do. And for the first time since joining the army, she felt like every hour of practice, every bruise, every rejection had led her here, to this valley, to this moment. The enemy wasn't finished. They regrouped again, shifting toward the western slope, using smoke grenades to mask their movements. Kara switched positions, crawling across the tower's floor to a new angle. Through the haze, she saw shadows weaving closer. Her heart drummed faster, not with fear but with urgency. The smoke made her work harder, judging by movement, by brief flashes of shape, but she adapted. One by one, she dropped the figures pressing forward, the recoil slamming into her shoulder again and again. The smoke cleared in patches, revealing bodies sprawled along the slope, others retreating in disarray. The radio crackled with the long-awaited message. Reinforcements were less than 10 minutes out. 10 minutes, Kara thought grimly, was still forever in the furnace of battle. She pushed the thought aside and chambered her next round. Her officer crouched beside her again, his voice lower this time. "They'll write you up for this, you know. Acting without orders." His words were half warning, half respect. Kara didn't look away from her scope. "Then they can write," she said quietly, "but they'll write it on the graves of 20 men I saved." The officer didn't answer, but his silence carried agreement. He passed her another loaded magazine without being asked. In that moment she realized she had crossed the invisible line. She was no longer the untested, doubted recruit. She was the anchor, the shield, the sharpshooter keeping the unit alive. They could deny her paperwork, status, titles, but they couldn't deny the battlefield. The field spoke truth louder than any report. And the truth was undeniable. Lieutenant Kara Hensley was combat, through and through. The minutes dragged like hours, each second stretched by the whine of bullets and the concussive thump of explosions. Kara's shoulders ached, her cheekbone bruised from the rifle's stock, but her focus never wavered. Every shot mattered. Every heartbeat carried the weight of lives. Below her, the outpost resembled a storm-battered ship barely holding against crashing waves. Soldiers scrambled to resupply, hauling ammunition crates from storage, dragging the wounded into whatever cover they could find. Blood stained the dirt, dark streaks spreading beneath broken bodies, but still the line held. Kara's shots carved order from chaos, thinning the tide enough for her comrades to breathe. She could feel the shift, respect replacing doubt in the way they glanced toward the tower. They didn't see her face, didn't need to. They knew someone up there was watching over them with unwavering precision, and that knowledge gave them courage to fire back harder, stand taller. Kara knew then that trust on the battlefield wasn't given by ranks or words. It was earned in moments like this, forged in gunfire and fear. But the enemy was desperate too. Their leader gone, their ambush ruined, they fought with savage determination, trying to claim some victory before reinforcements arrived. A fresh wave broke from the treeline, 20 figures sprinting across open ground with reckless speed, grenades flashing at their belts. Kara's breath stilled. If even a handful reached the sandbags, the outpost would be torn apart. She aligned her scope, the crosshairs dancing with each heartbeat, and fired. One by one the runners fell, tripping over each other, grenades detonating in premature bursts as bodies crumpled. The survivors faltered, terror flashing in their eyes as if death itself perched invisible on the tower. Kara's magazine clicked empty just as the last of them stumbled back, retreating into the shadows. She reloaded with mechanical speed, sweat stinging her eyes, and whispered to herself, "Not today." Below, cheers rose faintly, short, strained, but heartfelt. They had seen the charge broken, their deaths delayed again. No one knew her name in that moment, but every soul in the valley felt her presence. Then came the scream over comms, "Sniper! Sniper!" Kara jerked her scope upward, scanning the opposite ridge. A glint of glass betrayed the enemy marksman hidden among the rocks. He had been waiting, biding his time, and now he fired with lethal patience. A soldier below collapsed instantly, shot through the chest. Another ducked, narrowly avoiding death. Kara knew the enemy sniper was trained, skilled, and patient. This duel wasn't about who shot first, it was about who breathed steadier, who mastered fear better. She shifted position, crawling lower to reduce her silhouette, her heartbeat slowing as training took over. Through the scope, she caught sight of him again, his barrel peeking from cover, his eye glinting like a predator's. For a fraction of a second their gazes aligned across the valley, two hunters recognizing each other. Kara exhaled, pressed the trigger, and her bullet reached him first. The figure snapped backward, lifeless, his rifle clattering onto the rocks. Silence followed, then a relieved murmur rippled through the comms. Kara had ended the duel before it had truly begun. She swallowed hard, knowing it could have been her lying dead in the dirt, but that was the life she had chosen, whether they had given her combat status or not. The battle dragged on, but the enemy's rhythm faltered. Leaderless, snipers gone, their assaults turned disorganized. Kara watched as they argued in the open, some retreating, others trying half-hearted pushes. Each time they regrouped, she punished them with steel precision. Her shots became not just defense but deterrence, eroding their morale with each body left sprawled in the dirt. Her comrades fought fiercely too, emboldened by the knowledge that unseen eyes guarded their flanks. Even the officer who had once clipped her wings now barked orders with newfound vigor, his trust in her presence giving him strength to lead. Kara noticed it all in fleeting glimpses between shots, but she didn't allow herself pride yet. She knew battles often turned in the final moments, when fatigue set in and discipline frayed. She forced herself to remain sharp, to hold until the end. She could collapse later when it was over. At last, the horizon shimmered with movement, reinforcements. Dust trails marked approaching vehicles. The distant hum of rotors thundered from the skies. Relief surged through the outpost like fresh air after suffocation. The enemy saw it too. Panic rippled through their ranks and retreat began in earnest. Kara tracked them, picking off stragglers, ensuring they couldn't regroup for a last desperate strike. Within minutes, the valley emptied of enemy forces, their bodies littering the field, their ambition shattered. Reinforcement units poured into the outpost, medics rushing to the wounded, commanders demanding reports. Soldiers slumped with exhaustion, some laughing in disbelief at their survival, others weeping for the fallen. Kara lowered her rifle at last, her arms trembling from strain, her ears ringing with silence where gunfire had roared. She sat against the tower wall, chest heaving, sweat soaking through her uniform. It was over. They had held. And though no one said it yet, they all knew why. When she descended from the tower, every eye followed her. Men who had once mocked her now nodded with quiet respect. A young soldier clapped her shoulder, his eyes bright with gratitude. "You saved me," he whispered, voice breaking. Another simply saluted, though she outranked him. Even the officer who had dismissed her so easily before met her gaze with something like shame, then admiration. "Lieutenant Hensley," he said slowly, "I misjudged you." Kara said nothing, only gave a curt nod. She didn't need their words. The field spoke for her. The bodies lying silent in the valley spoke for her. 20 lives, maybe more, had been preserved because she refused to accept the limits they had placed upon her. The denial still burned, but now it was tempered by the undeniable truth. No one could erase what she had done. No one could deny that when the moment demanded it, she had been the blade that cut fate's hand. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in blood-red streaks, Kara sat with her rifle across her knees. The reinforcements secured the perimeter, collected the wounded, and prepared to bury the fallen. But Kara's eyes lingered on the valley below, on the silence that followed violence. She felt no triumph, no swelling pride. Only exhaustion, relief, and a quiet fire inside that whispered this was only the beginning. They could deny her titles, strip her of recognition, but they could never again doubt her worth. She had proven herself in the crucible of combat, and nothing would take that away. The debrief was a blur of harsh lights, stiff chairs, and the constant scratching of pens on paper. Kara sat in the center of the long table, her uniform still smudged with dust and gunpowder, her rifle surrendered to the armory. Around her, the senior officers watched with unreadable faces, their eyes measuring, dissecting. 4 hours, questions rained down. When had she first spotted the enemy? Who gave her the order to fire? Why she engaged without clearance? Kara answered each steadily, her voice calm though her body ached with exhaustion. She didn't raise her tone, didn't defend herself with anger. She simply told the truth. She saw the threat, she acted, and lives were saved. Silence lingered after her words, broken only by the shifting of papers. The commanding officer, a grizzled colonel with eyes sharp as a hawk's, leaned forward. "By regulation you disobeyed standing orders. By regulation you placed yourself outside the chain of command." His words cut like blades, but Kara didn't flinch. She met his gaze evenly, knowing the unspoken weight of the next line. "But by action you saved 20 lives. Possibly the entire outpost." The room stilled. For the first time in her career, no one laughed at her ambition, no one whispered doubt. They listened because they couldn't deny what had happened. Word of the battle spread fast, carried on the breath of soldiers who had been there, who swore that without the unauthorized sniper on the tower, they'd all be corpses. Stories grew with each telling, how she dropped the enemy leader with a single shot, how she dueled another sniper and won, how she cut down wave after wave until reinforcements arrived. By the time official reports reached command, Kara's name was already carved into rumor and reputation. Yet recognition came reluctantly. Some officers argued she had been reckless, that her disobedience set a dangerous precedent. Others, those who understood the weight of combat, quietly admitted she had done what regulations never could. She had saved lives through sheer skill and willpower. Kara herself avoided the politics swirling above. She spent her days in the infirmary, visiting the wounded, offering silent support to the young men who owed her their survival. They looked at her differently now, with gratitude that words couldn't capture. Myers, the 19-year-old she had covered, cried openly when he saw her. "You didn't have to save me," he whispered. Kara simply rested a hand on his shoulder. "Yes, I did." Despite the respect from those who mattered, the upper brass remained cautious. They placed her under review, suspended her from field duty until a decision could be made. For Kara, the waiting was worse than the firefight. She had faced death without fear, but now she faced bureaucrats with power to erase her from service. Each day she drilled alone, ran the obstacle courses, cleaned her rifle with obsessive care. Other soldiers watched, some joining her silently as though drawn by her determination. Slowly, a quiet following formed, men and women who saw her not as an anomaly, but as proof of what a soldier could be when given the chance. They called her the Ghost on the Tower, a name whispered with a mixture of respect and awe. Kara ignored the nickname, but inside, it stoked the fire she had carried since the day they denied her combat status. She had shown them once. If needed, she would show them again. The decision came 2 weeks later. She was summoned to headquarters, summoned not to a hearing but to the colonel's office. The man studied her for a long time, his lined face unreadable. "Lieutenant Hensley," he said finally, "the board is divided. Some want you reprimanded. Some want you commended. I am choosing the latter. Effective immediately, you are cleared for combat status. Your actions in the valley were not just brave, they were decisive. I can't ignore that." He slid a paper across the desk. Kara's name was written at the top, beneath it the words, "Combat Qualified Sniper." For a moment she just stared, the weight of it sinking in, the vindication washing over her. She signed with steady hands, but her chest tightened with something deeper than pride. This wasn't about proving herself anymore. This was about carrying the responsibility that came with that title. The colonel leaned back. "But understand this, status or not, what you did was extraordinary. Don't expect the battlefield to always grant such clarity. You'll be tested again." Kara nodded, her voice firm. "Then I'll be ready." Ready came sooner than anyone expected. Within days, reports arrived of renewed enemy movements, larger forces gathering near the eastern ridge. The valley skirmish had been only the beginning, a probing attack before the storm. Now, intelligence feared a full assault aimed at breaking the line entirely. Units were mobilized, defenses reinforced, and for the first time Kara's name appeared on the official roster, not as an observer but as a combat sniper. The soldiers who had fought beside her in the valley greeted her inclusion with cheers, slapping her back, handing her extra rounds, grinning with the reckless confidence of men who believed she was untouchable. Kara didn't smile, didn't let herself bask in their faith. She checked her rifle twice, adjusted her scope and packed every round with care. She knew the next battle would be worse, bloodier, harder. And she knew the burden of expectation now lay heavy on her shoulders. She had saved them once. They would expect her to save them again. That night, as the camp buzzed with preparation, Kara sat alone on the watchtower, staring out into the dark hills where the enemy gathered. The stars above burned cold and silent, indifferent to the struggles of men and women below. Kara tightened her grip on the railing, feeling the steel bite into her skin. She thought of the valley, of the men who had looked up at her in awe, of Myers' trembling gratitude, of the officer's silent admission. She thought of the paper she had signed, the recognition hard-won. But above all, she thought of the promise she had made to herself long ago, that she would prove she belonged no matter the cost. Her reflection in the dark glass of the scope stared back at her, eyes hard, determined. They had denied her once. They would never deny her again. The night before the assault was too quiet. The kind of silence that carried weight, thick and uneasy, as if the air itself held its breath. Kara lay in her bunk, boots still on, rifle within arm's reach. Around her, the barracks buzzed with restless energy, men cleaning weapons that were already spotless, others writing hurried letters, some whispering prayers into the darkness. Kara didn't write, didn't pray. She lay with her eyes open, listening to the slow heartbeat of the camp, thinking of the valley and the blood already spilled. She could feel it in her bones. The enemy wasn't just coming with another probing force. This would be different. This would be decisive. She sat up long before dawn, strapping on her gear in silence, her movements smooth and practiced. When the alarm finally sounded, she was already standing at the door, rifle slung, eyes sharp. Outside, the eastern horizon glowed faintly, a promise of light soon to be swallowed by smoke and fire. By first light, scouts confirmed it. The enemy had massed in numbers they hadn't seen before, hundreds, maybe more, spreading across the ridges like a black tide. Vehicles rumbled in the distance, heavy artillery moving into position. The outpost trembled with anticipation. Soldiers scrambled to fortify defenses, stacking sandbags higher, dragging ammunition crates into position. The colonel barked orders, his voice steady despite the storm bearing down. Kara climbed the tower once more, the same vantage that had given her purpose. Only this time she wasn't an outsider acting without orders. She was on the roster, her role clear, sniper support. Her spotter joined her again, nervous but loyal, setting up binoculars and marking ranges. "They'll throw everything at us," he muttered, wiping sweat from his palms. Kara didn't answer. She was already adjusting her scope, lining the sights on the ridgeline where shadows gathered. Through the lens she saw them, the enemy soldiers fanning out, faces grim, weapons ready. They had come to break the line, to bury the outpost under their boots. Kara steadied her breath. The storm was here. The first barrage came sudden and brutal. Mortar fire screamed overhead, exploding across the perimeter in fountains of dirt and fire. Men were thrown off their feet, walls shuddered, the sky lit with smoke. Shouts filled the air as medics rushed, as soldiers scrambled to return fire. Kara braced herself against the railing, ignoring the tremors shaking the tower, and searched for targets. She found them quickly, enemy spotters with rangefinders directing the barrage. She dropped one with a clean shot, then another, disrupting their aim. The mortars faltered, their shells landing wide, buying precious moments. Below, machine gunners opened up, their barrels blazing. The battle roared to life, chaos swallowing the dawn. Kara fired again and again, each shot deliberate, each target chosen not at random but with cold calculation. Leaders, radio men, heavy gunners. She wasn't just killing. She was dismantling their ability to fight. But the enemy pressed harder, waves of infantry charging through the smoke, undeterred by their losses. The ground shook with the rumble of armored carriers grinding forward, steel beasts bristling with guns. Kara's stomach tightened. Small arms fire would barely scratch them. She scanned desperately until she spotted fuel canisters strapped to their sides, weak points exposed by poor preparation. She took a breath, fired, and one erupted in fire, the explosion ripping through the carrier, men scattering in panic. The soldiers around her cheered, but Kara didn't pause. She found the next, adjusted for distance, and struck again. Another armored vehicle went up in flames, its turret spinning wildly before collapsing. For every kill, though, more poured forward. The battlefield became a sea of bodies, smoke, and thunder. Kara lost count of her shots, her hands aching from the constant recoil, but she never stopped. Each pull of the trigger was one more heartbeat spared for her comrades. The enemy adapted, learning from their mistakes. Sharpshooters began targeting the tower, their rounds cracking against the wood and steel, splinters flying around Kara's face. Her spotter cursed, ducking low. "They're onto us," he shouted. Kara crawled to a new angle, pressing herself flat against the floorboards, using the tower's beams for cover. Through her scope she caught glimpses of the snipers, their barrels glinting in the sun. It became a deadly dance, spot, fire, move, repeat. Twice she came. Within a hair of being struck, bullets grazing past her ear, tearing into the wall behind. But she outlasted them, her shots sharper, faster, more ruthless. One by one the enemy snipers fell silent. Her heart pounded, sweat stinging her eyes, but she refused to yield. This tower was her ground, her battlefield, and she would not be forced from it. Below the fight raged hotter. The enemy had breached the outer barricade, swarming toward the sandbags in vicious close combat. Kara watched with clenched teeth as her comrades fought hand to hand, knives flashing, rifles used as clubs when ammunition ran dry. She wanted to be down there with them, blade in hand, shoulder to shoulder, but she knew her role. From above, she cut down attackers who tried to flank, cleared paths for her unit to regroup, and struck with precision when chaos threatened to overwhelm them. At one point she saw Myers again, his youthful face twisted with terror as he fumbled to reload. 3 enemy soldiers rushed him at once. Kara's rifle cracked 3 times, each shot saving him before the blade or bullet could strike. Myers looked up toward the tower, eyes wide, his mouth forming her name though she couldn't hear it. That was enough. She reloaded, her focus harder than steel. Hours bled together, the battle stretching into a haze of smoke, fire, and screams. Kara's body screamed for rest, her arms numb, her shoulder raw from recoil. But she pushed through, driven by something deeper than endurance. She thought of the day they told her she wasn't fit for combat, of the men who laughed, of the papers that dismissed her worth. She thought of every drop of sweat, every bruise, every quiet night spent proving herself when no one was watching. And she funneled it all into the rifle, into each trigger pull that kept her comrades alive. By the time the sun climbed high, the enemy's wave had faltered. Piles of their dead littered the ridge, smoke rising from their shattered vehicles. The survivors pulled back, retreating in disarray. The battlefield stilled, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the crackle of flames. Kara lowered her rifle at last, her body trembling. The tower was scarred, pocked with bullet holes, beams splintered but still standing, just like her. Below, the outpost cheered weakly, men raising their fists, voices ragged but victorious. Kara closed her eyes, the sound washing over her like distant thunder. She had been tested again, harder than before. And once more she had not only endured, she had proven that she belonged, under the thick canopy of night, with only the dim glow of the moon breaking through the clouds. Elena and her squad pushed forward through the ruined outskirts of the small village where intelligence had reported enemy activity. The village had been evacuated months earlier, leaving behind hollow houses, shattered windows and walls scorched by fire. Every corner looked like a trap waiting to be sprung, and every alley carried the weight of silence too heavy to be natural. Elena moved with a measured pace, her rifle steady in her hands, her senses stretched as far as they could go. The memory of the near disaster at the supply depot still burned in the minds of her squadmates, but that memory was also the reason they followed her without hesitation now. She had proven what instinct and resolve could achieve, even if the higher command refused to recognize her as combat-worthy. But out here, far from paperwork and military politics, her voice carried weight. Sergeant Matthews gave hand signals for a sweep of the next street, and Elena slipped to the right flank, hugging the shadows of a broken wall. Her mind worked through the layout of the village, remembering satellite images she had studied the night before. The enemies would not waste time hiding in basements or scattered homes. They would set up somewhere with line of sight, where ambushes could be triggered and where escape routes were close by. That left the church tower at the heart of the village, and possibly the schoolyard just beyond it. As her thoughts lined up with the tension in her chest, she heard it, a faint click, unnatural against the night's backdrop. Her instincts flared and she raised her fist sharply, halting the squad just seconds before a tripwire became visible under a shard of moonlight. Private Harris exhaled shakily, realizing how close he had come to setting off what looked like an improvised explosive. No words were exchanged, only quick nods of acknowledgement, the kind given to someone whose judgment had just saved their lives yet again. Elena crouched, tracing the wire to its source, and saw a cluster of 3 charges buried shallow under rubble. The enemy had prepared not just to kill but to scatter fear and chaos. She marked the location silently and they diverted. The path ahead grew more dangerous with each step. Soon the sound of muffled voices carried through the cool air, coming from the direction of the church. Elena's heart pounded, but her hands never trembled. She signaled with 2 fingers, guiding the team to split and encircle. Through the jagged frame of a window, she caught her first sight of them. 5 armed soldiers crouched inside the church, weapons resting on windowsills, scanning for movement in the dark. They weren't waiting for a fight, they were preparing to start one. Her eyes swept quickly, and then froze on a crate shoved against the wall. The markings were clear, explosives. And then she understood. They weren't here to hold the village. They were here to blow it apart when the convoy passed through at dawn. The convoy carried medics, supplies and non-combat personnel. Nearly 20 lives that had no idea death was waiting here. Her throat tightened at the thought. She tapped her earpiece softly and relayed what she had seen. Matthews cursed under his breath but asked, "Options?" Elena whispered back that she had one, though it wasn't without risk. She spotted the narrow bell tower above the church, and with a well-placed shot, she could detonate the small stash of fuel stacked beneath it. The resulting blaze would force the soldiers out and make it impossible for them to trigger the larger charges without dying themselves. It was a gamble, but hesitation would mean letting 20 unarmed people walk into an ambush they would never survive. Matthews gave her a long look, then gave a single nod, trusting her again. Crawling to higher ground on the side of a collapsed wall, Elena steadied her rifle. Her breathing slowed, the night fell away, and the world narrowed into the calm precision of her scope. She aligned her sights on the fuel cans, her finger brushing the trigger. For a moment she felt the doubt that had haunted her since the first day she had been told she wasn't good enough to fight. But then that doubt melted into focus and she squeezed. The shot cracked through the silence, followed instantly by a thunderous explosion that ripped through the church's lower wall. Flames roared upward, licking the wooden beams, and the enemy soldiers shouted in alarm, scrambling for cover as smoke swallowed their vantage points. The charges they had rigged were now too dangerous for them to reach, and their plan had been shattered before it began. The squad surged forward, covering angles, pressing the advantage. Elena moved with them, no longer just a shadow at the edge but a vital force driving their survival. In that moment she wasn't thinking of recognition, of denied status, or of politics. She was only thinking of the convoy, of the lives unknowingly moving closer, and of the fact that for the second time, she had acted on instinct and saved them all from certain death. The flames lit her face in sharp relief as she advanced, the rifle tight in her hands, and though smoke stung her eyes, her vision had never been clearer. The desert outpost was silent, bathed in the dim orange glow of the sinking sun, when Captain Elena Cruz steadied her breathing and pressed her cheek against the cold steel of the sniper rifle. Her fingers moved with precision, checking the chamber, the scope alignment, the wind drift, everything down to the final detail, because tonight there was no margin for error. Somewhere out there, hidden among the jagged ridges, the insurgent unit was waiting, armed with enough explosives to wipe out the entire convoy that would be moving through in less than 20 minutes. Her superiors had dismissed her warnings, had tried to cut her out of the mission entirely, but she had fought tooth and nail to be here, climbing the rocky bluff with gear strapped across her back while sweat and dust coated her skin. Now, lying prone on the edge, she scanned the darkness, watching through the glass for any sign of movement. Behind her, the small team of soldiers she had convinced to trust her waited in tense silence, each man and woman aware that the lives of 20 supply drivers and medics were about to hang on whether Elena could make the shot in time. She whispered into her comms, asking for the convoy's current location, and the voice on the other end confirmed they were only 5 kilometers out, pushing through the dry, narrow road that wound like a snake through the canyon. Elena's jaw clenched. 5 kilometers meant less than 15 minutes. She adjusted her scope again, her trained eyes sweeping across the ridges where shadows played tricks and the wind howled low like a warning. Then she saw it, just the faintest reflection, a glint of metal too sharp to be natural. Her pulse surged. Enemy spotter. She shifted slightly, adjusting her aim by half a degree, and slowed her breathing until the world outside her scope vanished. 1 heartbeat, 2 heartbeats, exhale, and she squeezed the trigger. The crack of the shot echoed against the canyon walls, and through her scope she saw the enemy's head snap back, their body crumpling like a rag doll into the dirt. She didn't have time to savor the confirmation. More figures shifted behind the ridge, scrambling, shouting. They knew they'd been spotted. Elena didn't waste time. She barked orders to her team, signaling them to flank left while she kept firing, each shot deliberate, each one meant to buy precious seconds. Her mind was calm, calculating distances, bullet drop, and timing with the clarity of someone born to do this work, no matter how many men in decorated uniforms had denied her the official title of combat operative. The insurgents tried to scatter, but she tracked them with merciless precision, dropping one then another, until the ridgeline erupted with muzzle flashes. Dust exploded near her position, bullets tearing into the rocks only inches from where she lay. She rolled, shifted, and fired again, her body moving with instinctive flow, each action drilled by endless hours of practice no one had cared to recognize. Her comm crackled with the urgent voice of the convoy commander, shouting that they were less than 3 kilometers out and asking if the path was clear. Elena didn't answer immediately. Her scope found the real danger. The detonator team, 2 men crouched behind cover with wires leading down into the canyon floor. Her stomach turned cold. They weren't going to ambush with small arms fire. They were going to bury the convoy in fire and rubble. She took a breath, steadied her shot, and fired. The first man fell, blood spraying against the rocks, but the second grabbed the trigger device and began fumbling with it, panic giving him speed. Elena shifted, fired again, and missed by a fraction. Cursing under her breath, she adjusted and fired once more. This time the bullet hit true, ripping through his shoulder and spinning him sideways, the detonator clattering uselessly to the ground. Her heart hammered in her chest. Seconds later, her squad supporting fire rained down, forcing the last of the insurgents to retreat, but Elena didn't move yet. She kept her eye on the detonator, finger tight on the trigger, until she was absolutely sure no one was close enough to reach it. Only when the radio confirmed the convoy was rolling safely through the canyon below did Elena allow herself to exhale fully. The supply trucks rumbled past, headlights cutting through the growing darkness, oblivious to how close death had come. From her perch above, Elena felt sweat cooling against her neck and a strange, fierce satisfaction settle in her chest. She had been denied her combat status, laughed at, dismissed as too careful, too by the book. But tonight she had been the only thing standing between 20 lives and a mass grave. The silence of the desert was heavy, broken only by the distant rumble of engines, and in that silence Elena understood something clearly. titles and status meant nothing. Results were what mattered, and she had delivered. Her squad regrouped with her at the bluff, their faces tired but filled with respect that no medal could match. She simply nodded, reloaded her rifle, and looked out over the endless expanse of desert, already preparing herself for the next fight. Because this war wasn't over, and neither was she. Dawn of a legend, 800 words, Rat Ka and Hira Dir Dir Uter Rahada, or Osman Ki Kagar Par Pali Suraj Ki Kurnian Chamak Rahi T. Los Angeles Ki Hawa Bi Dunli T. Lekan Uzmi Jeet Ki Ek Chamak T Jo Lagan Kadilan Main Bar Rahi T. Shihar Kalag Ubi Rat Ka Kaufasi Ubhar Rahi the, Magar Unki Ankon Main Ek Naya Fakar the. Unk Upar JSNE Rakwali Ki T. Wo Koi Am Sapahi Yafaji Nahi T. Wo Ek Laki T Jisa Log Kamzer Kate. The Ek Laki Jisa Kaha Gaya the Ku Wo Kabiji Forces Bardash Nahi Kar Sakti. Lekin USI Any Dushman Ku 12 Bombers Ko Roka or Apni Shihar Ko Mafas Banaya. Eliza Fighter Jet Se Utri, Uski Per Thake Hu the Magar Uski Dil Main Ekajib Sekunda. Runway Ku Kinar Faji Kata the Salute Kardi Hu, or Media Ku Cameras Us Par Zoom Kar Rahitha. Uski Uniform Dol or Dund Se Bari Hui T, Magarus Uniform Ki Har Silai Ek Kahani Kh Rahi T. Ek Asi Kahani Jo Kabi Buli Nahi Jayagi. Ek Bujurg Mechanic, Jo Salin Se Base Par Kam Kar Raha the Age Bada or Bola. Beta, Aj Tum Wokar Daikaya Jo Hum Mainasi Koi Sak Binahi Sakta the. Tum Surf Pilot Nahi Ho. Tum Hamarias Ho. Eliza Muscarei, Uski Hantan Par Hockey Asai the Kenti Lekan Uzmi Garv Bitha. Usan Jawab Dia. Main Surf Apna Fars Niba Rahi T. Yashihar Marabi Hai. Or Jab Tak Main Zinda Hoon, Koi Biasi Nuksan Nahi Pocha Sakta. Uski Yabat Sun Hai Lagan Kadilan Main Ek Naya Jazba Bargaya. Pura Base Talian or Narun Se Gunjatha. Shihar Ki Taraf Se Biawaz Ain Lagi T. Lagan Any Rat Ko Apni Garan Ki Shatan Se Unjets Ki Gunj Suni T or Deka the Kaizek Akili Ladki Any Dushman Kamu Kabla Kia. Abunk Lier Eliza Surfek Nam Nahi T. Ek Misal T. Media Uski IRD Gur Jama Ho Gai. Sawalan Ki Barish Hon Lagi. Tum Kisna Kaha the Ku Tum Kamzer Ho? Tum Darnahi Laga Jab Tum 12 Bombers Ka Samna Kia? Eliza Any Apni Ankon Main Garai Late Hu Kaha. Dar To Zarawertha. Lekan Dar Koage Jid Hodi Hai. Agar Main Dar Koage Jekti Toa Aj Yashihar Jau Raha Hoda. Mui Apni Ma Ki Bat Yada Yi, Wo KDT, Asli Takid Dil Main Hodi Hai, Surf Jism Main Nahi. Or Aj Main Wo Sabit Kar Dia. Uski Bat Any Har Jishi Ko Kamash Kar Dia. Ek Chodi Laki Apni Walid Kusatha Yi or Eliza Kusamni Kadi Ho Kar Boli. Didi Main Bibadi Hok Pilot Benungi Bilkul Apki Terra. Eliza Ki Ankon Main on Subar A, Asanjekti Huyas Latki Kahath Pakra or Kaha. Tum Mujsbi Bedarin Benogi, Kyunki Tumher Sapna Bazad Hain. Us Wakdek Senior Officer Joe Pelli Uski against the Age Aya. Us Napna Kap Uter Kar Eliza Kasamni Raka or Bola. Mui Mafkarna Eliza. Main Tum Kabi Kamzer Samjatha. Aj Tum Sabik Kar Dia Kuasal Himat Rang, Jeans Yasurat Asi Nahi Hodi. Tum Hum Sabasi Age Nikli Ho. Yesunt Hai Eliza Kudil Ka Boj Halka Ho Gaya. Usna Officer Ki Taraf Dek Kar Biesit Nakaha. Main Kamzer Kabi Ti Hai Nahi Sir. Main Surf Mocha Chadi T. Or Usan Wol Mocha Jeet Liatha. Kuch Ganto Bad, Los Angeles Main Eliza Ka Nam Mashor Ho Gaya. News channels Any Usi Guardian of LA Ka Lakab Dia, or Lagan Any Uski Liya Rallies Nikalni Shuru Kar D. Har Jaga Uski Tasvir Lane Lagi, Magar Eliza Kaliya Yeshorat Secondary T. Uski Liya Asli Jeet Yati Kuasan Sabik Kar Dia Kukoibian San, Chahi Usi Kamzer Kaha J, Apni Eradid Ki Takad Isi Denaya Badal Sakta Hai. Rat Ki Wo Jang Surfek Ladai Nahi T, Woek Payam the. Or Wo Payam Yethe, Takat Surf Muscles or Machines Main Nahi Hodi, Takat Unlagan Kudil Main Hodi Hai Jo Harman Esi Inker Kar Deed Hain. Eliza Abek Legend Band Shuki T, or Uski Kahani Surf Los Angeles Tak Nahi Rukni T. Uski Awaz Denaya Bar Kalagan Tak J Rahi T, Jo Usi Sik Rahi the Ku Agar Tum Kabi Kamzer Kaha J, Tosamaj Lo Ku Tumhara Wakdain Wala Hai. Eliza Any Osman Ki Taraf Deka, Jahana Bi Uski Jet Kanishan Chamak Rahida, or Usandir Esi Kaha. Main Tayar Hun, Agel Mission Koliya. Is Tara Ek Ladki, Jisa Kaha Gaya the Kuwo Kabiji Forces Gel Nahi Sakti, Ek Asi Misal Ban Gai Jo Hamesha Yad Raki Jayagi. Or Los Angeles Ki Galleon Main, Lagabek Nara Lagate the, Eliza Hamari Shanghai, Eliza Hamari Janhai. Ye kahani yahan kadam nahi hodi, baki ek ne dor ki shuruad hodi hai. The end.